Get in the van!
We're doing
We're doing
podcast
podcast
stuff.
stuff. This time with video.
Woo! You get to see what we look like. It's very exciting.
Oh dear.
So I am Twisted Cat,
And I'm Patch.
and yeah, this is Get in the Van. We have a very special episode tonight. We're not reviewing anything, and it's not tonight. It's this afternoon. But I don't think anybody cares because they can listen to it whenever they want. We have with us Stephanie Cabral, who is a amazing photographer who has shot some of the most amazing bands. Her bio says from Metallica to Lady Gaga, from photo pits to red carpets, Stephanie brings energy, imagination, and professionalism to every shoot. Straight out of college in the early 90s, she became the photo editor of Rip magazine, and since then her photos have been published in Rolling Stone, Spin, Metal Hammer, Guitar World, Classic Rock, Prog Mag, Drum, USA, Yahoo, Metal Edge, Kerrang, Metal Maniacs, and countless other publications. Her photos have appeared in books published by HarperCollins and have graced album artwork, DVDs, posters, billboards, advertisements, bumper stickers, t-shirts, and just about anything else that you can stick a photo on. She's known for striving for unique and captivating images, whether it's live concert or a studio. And she has a knack for finding unusual photo locations and is able to build a fast trust with whoever she's shooting. Stephanie's collaborative skills inspire, allowing her subjects to put their best foot forward to create images that define them as an artist. So, and she's recently added video to the mix, which is exciting. So, Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Wow, that's a pretty awesome bio recap. I got to thank my dear friend Catherine Turman, who's an amazing writer, wrote that for me. I'm like, oh wow, I sound awesome.
You do sound awesome, and your pictures absolutely reflect that as well. So hopefully we're not going to ask you the same questions that other people have asked you. I try not to be repetitive. So let's get into it. Who influenced you the most in the beginning of your career?
Oh, that's easy. That's Niels Lozauer. When I was probably 13 to 19, I used to collect Rip magazine and a bunch of rock and roll magazines, actually, and look through all the photos. And it just happened to be all my favorite photos were done by an LA photographer named Niels Lozauer. And when I was, I guess, probably around 19, I moved to Los Angeles and I met Neil by interning at Rip magazine, and he was one of their photographers. And he's a character. I adore him, but he was very much like anything you ever need, just let me know. And kind of showed me too that you don't have to be a jerk no matter how long you've been in the business. There are some guys that have been in the business 30, 40, 50 years that are just very entitled, and Neil was never like that. So it just made me like love the industry even more.
Right
Did
on.
you have a passion for photography prior to that? Or how
Oh,
did you gravitate toward metal?
to metal or photography? I was like, I think metal was first. When I was probably 12, 13 years old, I started listening to bands like Rat and Motley Crue, and I was a kind of a rebellious little teen, and I liked the angst of it. And as I got older, I was a huge music fan, collected vinyl and later CDs, cassettes, T-shirts, posters, everything I could get my hands on. But I lived in Central Valley, California, so Modesto, California. There wasn't a whole lot going on there. Most bands don't even play within like a
Good
2 hour
punk scene, though.
radius. There you go. And when I was probably 16, like a junior in high school, I took a photography class as an elective and instantly fell in love with it. And from that point on, I took more and more photography classes. It was just seemed to be a natural fit. I was a decent artist in high school, but not great. Like I could draw okay, but photography, I was always head of the class. It just clicked with me. Like my what was in my head, I could express more through a camera than I could with a pencil and paper. So I kind of combined the two, and I started as a teenager taking photos of bands, and then went to college at Cal State Fullerton and got my degree. And a lot of the photos, my portfolios was like local LA bands and more. And as a senior in college, I interned at Rip Magazine, and which was huge heavy metal magazine in the 80s and 90s. And then when I graduated from college on a Friday, that Monday, they hired me on full time as I think I was an editorial assistant at first, and then I became photo editor. So that was kind of my entry into rock photo guitar before doing it on my own. Like I used to go to concerts as a teenager, and I had a little spy camera that took 35 millimeter film that I would literally shove down my pants so that security wouldn't find it, because back then no one had cell phones, because I'm old, and you weren't allowed to take photos. So I would sneak the camera in and just hope for the best. And I still have a few of those photos. Like I have an Alice Cooper photo hanging on in my office that's like signed by Alice, that I took with a little spy camera that I bought. So I'm already rambling my mouth off, but in the 80s, you got to remember, no cell phones. And even like now we think of a point and shoot camera as about the size of your phone, right? But back then, the smallest camera that held 35 millimeter film was still pretty big. So I found this spy camera that was about the size of a regular point and shoot, like a little bit smaller than my cell phone, and that you could put 35 millimeter film on, and had like, you'd focus by feet. So you kind of had to guess how far away the subject was, but it was small enough. It was about the size of a cassette tape. So I could shove it in crotch of my pants. And when security came by, they couldn't grab a teenage girl by the crotch to make sure that, and it was plastic. There was no metal detectors back then or anything. So that's really how I started initially building some sort of portfolio before I came to LA, started doing it professionally.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Did you travel to LA a lot for shows, or did you mostly see shows up in the Central Valley when you were a kid?
So when I was a kid, I couldn't really, like, I had a little beater car. I couldn't really drive to San Francisco. I did sneak out a couple times to see bands in San Francisco. Sorry, Mom. And so I probably didn't go to a lot of shows until I was like 19 and moved to LA. So I came to LA as like a tourist, like on vacation, go to, Venice Beach or Disneyland. And because I lived probably 5.5, 6 hours away from here, and here, because I live in LA now. And, but when I went to college, when I decided to go to college to get my bachelor's degree, it was like, LA's it. I'm going to LA. They had 2 heavy metal radio stations here. They had the magazine I wanted to work for here. And I was like determined, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm going to LA. I'm going to be a rock photographer. And I'm going to, sounds like something a stupid 16-year-old would say.
Did it
I'm much older now. You know what? They really didn't care what I aspired to be as long as I finished school. So they were like, all right, you finish college, go see what you want to do. And to be quite honest, like I've always done photography, but I, in the beginning, had a lot of jobs that I could do both. So I wasn't just like, trying to do the freelance gig straight out of college. Out of college, I worked for Rip Magazine. So I had a regular paycheck that I did photos for. From there, I worked at a record company, and then Sony Music, and then Yahoo Music. So I had a lot of like big kind of corporate jobs that I was music director, publicist, where I could also incorporate being a photographer and do photography on the side on the weekends, at night, that sort of thing. It wasn't until probably 2008 where I stopped, no more 9 to 5, just full-time photographer.
Cool. What photographers do you admire these days other than Neil?
I guess that depends on if you're saying rock photographer or not, but I would say
either is fine.
I mean, the rock photographers are always less known. There's a rock photographer named Dean Carr, who he also does mostly music videos now, but he's got a super creative style, and he does a lot of the special effects, so to speak, in the camera. So it's not so much like Photoshop later. Love Neil for all the stuff he did in the 80s. As far as like ultimate, idol, it's Annie Leibovitz. Like she shoots more actors and but always celebs. And I was always kind of drawn to the celeb factor for a number of reasons. To be honest, it makes it easier to elevate a photo when you have a famous person in it. It's just like a movie, like, Joe Blow movie, but Joe Blow movie starring Brad Pitt is all of a sudden up at a higher level. So a great photo with my sister is one thing, but a great photo with Ozzy Osbourne in the photo is way better.
That brings up a thing. I'm going to shoot ahead to that then. So
Okay.
you recently did a thing with Ozzy and Tenacious D,
I did.
which
That
is,
was
yeah, please.
insane. So as I said, I got out of college. I did work for a number of different companies. Sony Music was one of the companies. So from that, we're talking the late 90s. I worked a lot with Sharon Osbourne's management. So over the years, I've done a bunch of different things with the Osbournes. I was lucky enough to be like the only photographer approved to shoot the Ozfest, which is his, giant festival where there's probably 40 bands and Ozzy's the headliner. And it was like, I was the only photographer approved. So like that kind of stuff I've been lucky to do. But an actual session is always evaded me until now. So the UK magazine that I primarily shoot for, Metal Hammer magazine, they hit me up and said, "Hey, you want to go to Ozzy's house and do a shoot with him and Tenacious D?" I was like, duh. Like, I couldn't respond fast enough. I was like, yeah. And of course I asked for everything. I'm emailing management, like, can I bring lights? Can I do this? Can I add this? What about an assistant? Can we do? And they were super accommodating. It was very cool. We rolled up, the writer and I rolled up about maybe half an hour, 45 minutes early. And the Tenacious D guys were already there. Jack Black even helped me carry my heavy lighting case up the steps. Like, I felt bad. I was like, dude, you're the talent. And he's like, I am not going to sit here while you carry that heavy ass bag up those stairs. Cause my case weighs I weighed it. My lighting case was 85 pounds. Almost nobody ever helps me. I'm like, thanks guys. And so it was only like maybe 10 steps. It was like 5 from the driveway, another 5 from the walkway into the house, but 85 pounds, I'm like, so Jack was so gracious, like, total sweetheart, helped me carry stuff in. And the magazine was doing a thing where Tenacious D takes over the magazine, and they were asked, who, if you could pick, would be your dream person to interview. And they picked Ozzy Osbourne, which I probably would have done the same thing. I'm like, oh, if I have one dream person that I haven't shot yet that I'd like to, and that would be Ozzy. Like I've done live photographs of Ozzy, and he did like a pop-up meet and greet at the Palladium, they did an Ozzy store. So I filmed that for Sharon Osbourne's team. But yeah, to do an actual proper session, first time.
Right on.
Trent Reznor for me, but that is awesome.
I haven't done a session with Trent, but I don't think he's done soundtrack stuff. I don't think he's done typical music stuff in a while.
Not in a while.
Yeah. So who would be your dream photo shoot now that you've done a session with Ozzy?
I mean, I mean, that's so hard to say. I mean, I guess like I'd still say Metallica. I've done different things with Metallica over the years, but I'd like to do a current like session with them. Pretty much anybody that's not a jerk. I mean, I have fun at most of them.
And yet you choose Metallica.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah. I work with a lot of bands that people are like, oh, that guy's a jerk. That guy's a jerk. But most of the time, bands are really nice to me because I'm doing art for them. So it doesn't benefit them at all to be mean to me because they want to get the best likeness. They don't want to see a double chin, or they don't want to see a bald head, or, whatever it is. So typically 95% of the time, the artist is pretty nice to me.
So it's like, don't piss off your waitress, right? Got it.
Yeah, exactly, kind of. So it's all good. And I mean, like, whenever anybody asks, like, who was the worst person you ever photographed, and I can really only ever think of one person. I mean, there have been more challenging shoots. It's like you have 30 seconds before this artist goes on stage, and you've got to stand on the top of the little case and shoot down. And I'm like, ah. But as far as like difficult personalities, that was the drummer from Silverchair, like probably 20 years ago. And he was just such a little punk. I walked out. I was like, I don't need this.
Wow.
Yes.
So that's funny that you bring that all up, because one of our questions was, tell us the story of the worst shoot you've ever done. We don't need names. We just want the story.
I could tell names. I mean, and that would definitely be it. He was, I mean, they were already past their prime. So this was bop years. We're talking 5, 6 years later. So he still kind of had that mentality, like he was a giant rock star, and he was just very like treating me like the help. And I'm like,
Wait, was it the Hanson brothers, or was it Silverchair?
no, we're talking about wait, isn't Mbop the did
That's
I say
the Hanson
Silverchair?
brothers. No,
Wait.
Mbop is Hanson.
Did I say Silverchair?
At
Yeah.
the beginning, yeah.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. It's not Silverchair. They were delightful. Oh no. It was Hanson. Hanson, shoot.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. Hanson, yes, the Mbop kids. It was the drummer from Hanson. No, I worked with Silverchair in the 90s too, but they were delightful. They were very sweet, polite, like little Australian kids. I'm sorry, my bad. I haven't had enough coffee yet.
Now, thank you.
Yeah, and sorry, it was Silverchair's great, Hanson, and don't get me wrong, the other guys from Hanson were fine. The
Nice.
singer was sweet, the drummer, little punk. He was
He was the
very
youngest.
entitled, dismissive, and kind of like, you're bothering me. I'm like, I'm leaving.
That actually brings up one of my questions, which is how do you deal with people who think like that your gender matters for what you do for a living?
Ooh, I don't get that question very often, but it's definitely very relevant, especially in my genre of photography. So, music, and especially heavy metal music, is predominantly a male, male artists, male crowds, male fans, male security. It's a double-edged sword. So sometimes it's a girl, she can't be up here because she's going to get hurt. But other times it's like, oh, sweetheart, so you don't get hurt, you can stand on the stage. All the ugly boy photographers can be in with the crowd. So it kind of works both ways. And I would say same thing with artists too. Sometimes to do a session with anybody, the subject always, no matter who you are, they have insecurities. And I think that a lot of artists or people tend to let their guard down more to a female than they would to a male photographer. Like, one of my inspirations, Niels Lozauer, he's very much like, come on, rocker, show me some energy, jump up and and he's famous for doing like all the Motley Crue photos in the 80s. And, he's very much like, one of the boys. I can't use that. So more like, hey, do you mind if I move your hair? You're looking so good. Like, oh, this is going to be a good shot for your mom. So I just work it differently, like if a guy's like, I want to be tough. I'm like, but mom could use a little smile, So it works both ways. But there is, a lot of times people ask, like, do you go on tour with bands? And rarely, because in a weird way, that's kind of, it's if you go on tour with a band, it's in the tour bus. It's not a very big space for 12 people to live in, and especially if you're a female. And so two-part, I don't want my partner thinking I'm off on tour for 2 months, like fooling around with band members. Band members all have wives and girlfriends, and it's always a weird thing when there's a female on the bus. Not always. There's some bands that are like family to me that, I've traveled, Fear Factory, Testament, like those kind of bands that I've known for 25, 30 years, it would be fine. But to get like a new band that wanted to go out on tour, that's the one thing that's a little like, I don't feel so comfortable with it. Not that I think that anything would happen, but it's a weird line, you know. So it's another one of those like, well, it'll probably be fine depending on who it is, but you know, I don't want to travel with a bunch of pigs and, you know, find myself in a bad situation either, you know.
Right. Right. Okay.
Who is your current favorite either female act or female person in metal? Because we are super pro these female fronted acts that are happening right now. Like we just saw The Warning and Plush, and they continue to blow our minds. We've seen them several times. So we're really into that. Who's your favorite at the moment?
Oh, at the moment. Um, gosh, and it's really a kind of a new favorite person. So typically I'm not a huge fan of so I'm not a huge fan of a lot of female vocalists because metal is supposed to be tough. And typically women, I mean, it's just genetics, women aren't as tough as men. But there are some bands like Arch Enemy, Angela from Arch Enemy was a total badass. Right now, I just went and saw this band. They're new on Metal Blade Records, new-ish, you know, 5, 6, 7 years. But this band Entheos, and their singer Cheney, she is not only pretty, but she's also tough, and she commands the crowd. And it was really great. They just played the Regent Theater, and like they got such a great response. So that's this band Entheos. I would say old school. One of my favorite female vocalists, old school if you're a metal fan, is Christina Scavia from Lacuna Coil, an Italian metal band. She's amazingly beautiful, and she also has a beautiful voice. She's also a beautiful person. Like everybody in that band was always so, like I've done sessions with them, live shots. They're always so generous. I mean, to the fact that like, come to our house in Italy, we'll cook for you, like that kind of thing. And so they've been around since the 90s, and I still love them. So I would say those are good for right now.
Okay.
I'm gonna forget somebody who's gonna be like, "You're a jerk. You didn't think of me." I know it.
What's your thought process during a shoot? How does shooting a show differ from doing a staged photo shoot?
I like your questions. They're not even repetitive at all. They're actually intuitive. So the thought process, two totally different thought processes. I've shot so many live shows. I mean, my career's, I'll date myself, but over 30 years now. So I couldn't even imagine how many live shows I've shot. So it's kind of like clockwork. Like I can do that in my sleep. There's nothing really to think about ahead of time other than, you know, maybe what gear I need to bring. Because if I'm shooting in a smaller place, I'm up close. Sometimes I'm up their nose. If I'm shooting, say, like a festival, sometimes they'll put photographers at the soundboard, which could be like an aftershock in Sacramento for Metallica. They put all the photographers at the soundboard. It was 100 feet away. So then I'm like renting a lens that weighs as much as I do in order to make sure that I get the close-ups. So for live, I really just have to think about what gear am I bringing to each show. And then while I'm at the shoot, again, I'm doing this a long time. There's only a few people in the pit that are going to have even close to the experience I have. Usually it's a lot of young people that are just starting out. So I'm just like trying to stay out of their way. Usually when a band comes on stage, all the photographers, especially if they're new, gravitate towards the singer. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go shoot the guitar player and the bass player. Well, everybody's consumed with the singer in the beginning, shoot the drummer, and then, you know, then I'll move over towards the singer. The biggest thing with shooting live is trying to get a shot that if it's a big show, there could be 40 to 80 photographers. Some of the festivals, there have been 80 photographers in the photo pit that are allowed. So a big festival like Ozfest, Knotfest, sometimes they do 40 photographers for the first 3 songs and then another 40 for the next, you know, 3 songs so that they can get 80 photographers in, because these are festivals that attract press worldwide. Right. But, you know, it's, if I get the guitar player at the edge of the stage, can I kind of get behind him so I can see the crowd? Is there like, you know, an angle where I can actually see the drummer and that kind of thing? Sometimes I'm taking a wide angle shot, the guitar player's foot on on the monitor, so I'm getting this super wide angle shot just to make it something different.
Sure.
As far as live session, kind of depends on the band. I usually ask them, hey, is there any photos you like? Is there any vibe you're going for? You know, are they like a trippy, you know, like new age proggy metal band, or do they just want to be evil or super colorful and poppy? And so I try and plan ahead. My most, I mean, I've most recently, I'm trying to think of, you know, the Ozzy shoot was kind of, it was in his like sitting room, so it was a limited space, and he had, the Osbournes have very nice, expensive taste. So how do you make, like, you know, the godfather of heavy metal look evil when he's surrounded by, like, you know, insanely beautiful, like, art, you know, oil paintings and like a paisley couch. And like, so I was pretty much just in close. So you didn't see, you know, the expensive, beautiful house. But I would say most shoots, you know, if it's a band like I did Goat Whore, and they were like evil Satan. So it was, I got real human skulls. I've got, you know, fog machines and red lights and make it evil. And then there's been other bands that they just want to be trippy. So I have done, like, there was this band Fallujah where we had video lights on them that were like red, I think, and then I had them move, and then I hit them with the strobe, so then it kind of freezes the image of them, so then they have this kind of like blurred image that worked really well for them. So just kind of, usually before a session, I'll spend time like thinking like different setups and what I need to do. And I just did a shoot with the band Fear Factory on Thursday, and their guitar player Dino always just wants, like, we look good, will you light us from overhead? And I like that. And I've done the same shoot with them 3 times. He's like, no, just do that same shot again, but with the new band guys. I'm like, how about we mix it up a little bit? And he always goes back to picking, he's going to hear this and laugh at me, but he always goes back to picking almost the same image that I did 10 years ago of him, because he just likes that. So it really just depends on the artist and kind of the vibe I'm getting from them. I've done a lot of shoots in the past where it's, you know, you have 5 minutes with Lady Gaga. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to try and get as much as I can get in that 5 minutes. Or, you know, I mean, I've had shoots that were 30 seconds before, you know, you set up everything ahead of time and you just like go. So it's, again, it's having my assistant come in so I can do test shots on him. So when the artist comes in, done, ready. I did a shoot with Alice Cooper backstage, literally 30 seconds before it was going on stage. So they're like, pop, 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 pop. They're like, gotta go. I took 5 shots. So luckily one of them was a great shot that was for the feature in the magazine.
Nice. Has an artist ever surprised you with what they wanted?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Because that's always better, to be honest. Like, I'm down to do whatever. I mean, I did a shoot with the band Overkill, and they were like, oh, you're so metal. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And they're like, no, that's why we love you. Like, there's not many photographers that would crawl around in pigeon shit. I'm like, what? I stood up. I thought it was like dried paint or white, like, I don't know, something. It looked like rubber. And we were underneath this bridge, and I was covered in pigeon shit. Literally walking around like, oh my gosh. But the artists, so gross. But the artists that usually, they don't surprise me, but that are the most creative are probably the people that know me the best. Mm-hmm. So when I'm working with an artist like, say, Armored Saint, you know, Joey Vera, the bass player for Armored Saint, he's like, hey, I have this endorsement with this amp company, but I want to be in zombie makeup. I want to be coming out of a gravesite. I want fog and I want lights, which is time consuming. So if he's down for it, I'll make it happen. Asking Ozzy Osbourne to crawl in a hole and put makeup on and do all this stuff, that's going to be like, haha, no. Probably no. It depends on what it's for, right? So you kind of got to know who you're working with. So Joey's always been great. Like, we've done a number of shoots, like his zombie shoot. I mean, I did a shoot with Lizzie Borden where I put latex all over him, and his sister-in-law took the latex off of him by took all his chest hair off. So, but he wanted something kind of weird, so we kind of dripped all this like white and black latex on him, and it was like, how does it come off? I'm like, oh, it should just peel off. As a girl, I'm like, it just peeled off me. So that's fine. Yeah, let's see, who else have I done like more crazy? I mean, I've done shoots with like, oh, I just did a shoot with the band the Zenith Passage. They're a new band on Metal Blade, and we went to this photo studio that actually has a rain room. And most of the time, artists are like, I do not want to get wet. These guys are like, yeah, we're gonna get wet and let's do photos. And I was like, so it was great. So did some video and stuff with them in the rain. Trying to think of more creative stuff. I mean, a lot of times an artist will be very specific. Most of the time, musicians care about their music and they just do whatever you think looks cool. Make us look cool.
Right.
I told you I was a blabbermouth. I
Oh
can
no,
talk all
this is
day.
great.
It's great. It sounds like we had some questions that I had set aside to talk about your equipment, your rig.
Okay.
But it sounds like you've got a very wide array of equipment that you use depending on the situation. So I'm not sure. I'm sure you can talk to this in some fashion, but like, what's your dream equipment setup and what's your current go-to rig?
I feel like I should go grab it, but it's so out of, I think my first professional camera was when I was in college. I worked for a photo lab, so I could get employee discounts for a Nikon, and I bought a Nikon in probably 90, 91.
One of the questions that I hadn't told Twisted Cat about that I was planning on asking was Nikon or Canon.
Right.
Thank you
well,
for
now
answering
it's
the question.
now it's Sony or a Nikon Z, and so that's the other dilemma with photographers right now. So do you go with a single lens reflex where there's a mirror in the camera, or do you go mirrorless, which is much smaller, much lighter, and no mirror? And most photographers I know are making that switch. I am slowly using it, but not switching, because there's something still about even shooting live, you can't hear anything. So I can feel in my hand when I'm shooting that the shutter's going off, and it's instantaneous. Whereas if I'm shooting a mirrorless camera, so an SLR, you look through the lens and you see what you're going to take a photo of through the lens. Whereas through a mirrorless camera, you're looking at a digital projection. So it's a video screen. That bothers me. I'm not really seeing what I'm photographing. And it's also not as fast on the multiple photos, because it is a digital image. It's like this, and I'm used to pow, 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 or whatever I want to do. So there's little things like that that I'm still leaning towards the SLR, but I use a mirrorless for all my video stuff. I use the Nikon incorporation with some of my video stuff as well, but pretty much. So right now I have a Nikon D4S, which they have a newer model, but at the same time, like, do I want to spend another $6,500 on a new camera when I think they're phasing them out? Nikon's moving all towards digital mirrorless cameras right now. And then I have a Sony that I use for all my video stuff, and usually a gimbal. Well, what's the word? Gimbal.
Yeah.
So I don't get the shaky hands. And I'm doing, still music video, not like actual music videos, but I do a lot of like, here's a guy running through his drum set, or here's a recap of the band during the day. So kind of incorporating what I already did with that video element to make myself more valuable.
Nice.
And as far as lenses go, I mean, I usually have a wide, a medium, and then a telephoto lens. If I'm shooting a festival, I have a 300 millimeter lens that's like this. And if it's a big festival and I know I'm going to be really far, I might rent the 600, which I have done. It's a pain. So
yeah, those are heavy.
I mean, even the 300 is like, the case is the size of a carry-on luggage. So it's huge.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for talking about that.
Oh, yeah. Sure. I'm pretty simple. I'm not really a gearhead. I'm more of a eye. I prefer that somebody can see with their eye a good photo. Like you could take a good photo on a phone, but it's not going to have the same resolution as a camera would. So it's that kind of thing that you can't really teach. It's kind of experience, or just knowing, like, if I move and that's the spot, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. What have been your favorite, your top 5 favorite shoots that you've done?
Oh, see, now you're gonna get me in trouble. I forget something.
Okay, let me just say, tell me some of your favorite shoots that you've done.
There you go. I was gonna say I'm gonna have to go to my website and remember what I shot. Because it has been 30 years, and I'm like, I can't even remember this week without looking at like my invoices. I mean, this has been a crazy week. So I'm like, all right, most definitely, hands down, one of my favorite shoots was that Aussie Tenacious D one. And it was a fairly simple, straightforward shoot, but just because Ozzy is a legend and, you know, the godfather of my favorite genre of music. So yes, that one. And the Tenacious D guys are hilarious. I would say my favorite shoots are probably with artists that as a teenager I was like super enamored with. So it doesn't even matter if they're a big artist. It's like, I'm a huge Dee Snider of Twisted Sister fan. You know, love him, adore him. So when I got a call a few years ago saying, hey, you know, Dee's got a new record out, he needs a photographer in LA, there's not a big budget, don't care, I'll do it. They're like, really? Don't care, I'll do it. And like the coolest thing is, you know, it's like I've shot D a number of times over the years for different things, but I get an email from him like, why am I not surprised? You know, you're the one they got to do me the favor. And we knocked it out in like 40 minutes. He's like, you're awesome. We're done. I'm like, but we got 20 more minutes. He's like, don't be offended. You got plenty of stuff. And he's still using that stuff. I've seen he's used those photos for autograph signing photos. He's used it for a bottle of wine or vodka, one of the two. I think maybe it's vodka. He's got a new vodka that the picture's on. I've seen it on like, was it on a t-shirt? I mean, like, oh, it was on a baby's book. Like Dee did like the lyrics for a baby book. So those photos have turned up everywhere. And it was literally like a 40-minute shoot. So I love that. I know, hard to believe Dee Snider, Twisted Sister, has a children's book.
No, I believe it entirely.
Right? He's got kids.
Yeah.
And then so I would say Dee, and then you know, I grew up kind of Bay Area adjacent, so I love those Bay Area bands. So still, I do a ton of photos for the band Testament. Same thing with the band Death Angel, and both those bands are like family. So when I last Testament shoot I stayed at the singer's house with him and his wife for 3 days, and it was like, you know, they're making me coffee in the morning, and it's more like hanging out with your friends. So I really like those kind of shoots. And then there are other bands like the band In Flames. I love those guys, and they don't usually set up everything in advance. They're just like, singer will be like, come on, Steph, let's go look around, see where we can find a good spot to take some photos. And you know, it's a different kind of vibe, but those are fun too. And yeah, and then Armored Saint, always great working with them because they're close friends. Pretty much anybody I've known for 30 years I love working with.
Sure. The Dee Snider thing brought up a question for me. Do you sign over rights or do you still retain copyright?
Good question. So it depends on the shoot. Typically, if I shoot live, I own everything. A magazine will basically lease the photos out, so they have them for a certain amount of time to use exclusively. If I'm doing a session, anything's negotiable, but typically what you do when you do a session is the artist buys, or the label buys, a full buyout. So Dee Snider paid me to buy all those photos, so he doesn't have to piecemeal me, pay for each photo. But then there are times where an artist is like, hey, you took this great live photo, I want to use this for a poster or a book or whatever. Then they have to pay me for that individual photo.
Okay.
So it really just depends. The majority of the time, though, when you do a session, it's for the artist, or at least when I do a session, typically it's for the artist.
All right. Sorry, big copyrights person, so I'm always curious.
No, it's it's a good question, because some people are like, oh, I can make t-shirts of Motley Crue because I took pictures of them, and I'm like, you still don't own their likeness.
Yeah.
So when we most of the time when you shoot a band live, especially a bigger band, there is a rights contract that you have to sign, which says you're using this for publicity uses only. You're not selling this for posters, t-shirts, or that kind of thing. So they are giving me rights to shoot them. Say Metallica is giving me rights to shoot Metallica because I'm shooting them for Metal Hammer magazine, and they want the publicity from the magazine, not for me to go back and try and sell the images to on my website. So lots of people do sell images on their websites, especially live images. I don't.
Do you feel
I
like
still
that's a
respect.
trust issue with the bands?
I do. And again, like I said, I've been doing this a long time. I don't want to piss anybody off, because then it's all about relationships. So I don't want the Osbournes thinking that I'm doing this photo shoot so I can turn back around and sell photos of Ozzy on eBay. It's not worth it. So yeah, definitely a trust issue. And most of the time, because I have been doing it so long, it's like I deal with not just artists, but I'm also dealing with band managers, with label artists, product managers. And if they all know and trust me, then it's like, oh, okay, cool. So like the Ozzy conversation, the magazine asked me, and they're like, you have a relationship with the Osbournes, right? And I'm like, yes, not Ozzy himself, but management. So I'm like, hey, just so you know, I'll give you full approvals on anything, if you need me to touch up anything. And they're, because I'm going to their house, so like, no, you're good. We trust you. So like that kind of thing.
I know.
I got to tickle.
So, you posted recently to Instagram about not shooting Jeff Hanneman's last show with Slayer and how you regret that. When you decide to not shoot a show that you're going to, what goes into that decision making?
That almost never happens. I quit drinking a long time ago, and so I really don't know what to do with my hands. So even if I'm not on assignment, I almost always bring a camera, because at home, you can see I always got my coffee cup, and I'm a very ADD kind of person with FOMO. So even if I'm going to see a friend's band play, like I did a session with Fear Factory on Thursday, they played Friday night at the Whiskey, and I'm like, well, I'm not on assignment, but I'm going to go. And I still brought my camera and shot photos, even though it was not for money or anything. So, to go to a show without a camera it's super rare. So the only reason I did it, that was his last show was actually the Big Four in India, where they do Coachella. So it was huge. It was like 50,000 people. It was the Big Four. It was Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax, and Megadeth. My partner at the time was playing in Megadeth. So, I had passes and everything. And I almost always work any show that he does. So in New York, I shot the New York Big Four show like a month earlier, where I was shooting for Guitar World and Revolver magazine. And they only allowed 20 photographers to shoot this show. It was at Yankee Stadium. So when it came to LA, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to watch as a fan. I'm going to leave my camera at home. Still can't help myself. I had a little tiny point and shoot with me, but predominantly no camera. And of course, while I'm there, I got text message from one of my editors saying, "Can you shoot some backstage stuff?" And I'm like, I don't even have a photo pass to be in the pit area. So I was really just there to hang out and be a fan. And it was just because I'd already shot the show. So I would say that's the only time I ever just watch a show, is if I've already covered the show recently. Like if I see a band 3 times in a row, I don't always shoot most of the time, but not always.
Okay.
So that's why. So yeah, nobody knew it was going to be Jeff Hanneman's last show, obviously. Right. So yeah, I was up in the balcony and I just took a quick picture from the stage of Slayer on stage, and I just kind of caught the top of Jeff Hanneman's head, and then it was like he passed away soon later, and I was like, oh
man. Right. Are there any other photo decisions that you regret either taking or not taking?
Ooh, photo decisions. Not taking or taking. That's, well, it sounds like that's that slippery slope of, do you take a picture with the artist backstage with a hooker and cocaine, or do you walk on by? I tend to go more towards the I'm not TMZ route. So it doesn't really bother me if I miss those shots. There are some bands that I'm like, oh, I wish I'd gone to that show or shot them live back when they were first coming up, because now they're huge. Like I got invited to go see Slipknot, like one of their first shows in LA. They were opening Ozfest, but it was like 9 o'clock in the morning, and to get to San Bernardino is like an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm like, I'm not leaving at 7 a.m. to shoot this unknown small band. But now it'd be cool to have those photos. But
Sure. I think I was at that show.
I was there. I missed them. They went on way too early that day. So there's like events that I wish I had gone to, but typically I shoot anything and then ask forgiveness later. Or, a lot of times if I'm shooting for the artist, I just tell them ahead of time. I'm like, hey, just so you know, you get approval on everything. If you guys want to throw baloney on a stripper's butt backstage, I'll take those photos for you, and you have the choice whether you release them or not. So you don't have to worry about me. Especially in this day and age, everybody's got a cell phone, so it doesn't really matter. But,
Right.
I started in the early 90s. So, there wasn't, you had to have some sort of trust. How's that?
Sure.
I have some blackmail photos on some people, stupid stuff, the singer of a band is like peeing all over the parking lot or something, like, stupid, goofy stuff.
So I
Shifting
think
gears.
we've got a curveball question for you here.
Uh-oh.
Do you take pictures when you go on vacation? More specifically, do you take pictures when you scuba dive? And how is it different for you? Obviously, it's technically different, but how does your thought process change?
Well, again, like I said, I always feel like I need to have a camera with me. So even when I was getting scuba certified, I brought a little Nikon sport camera that I could take underwater. Pretty much just a point and shoot. I'm a very new scuba diver. I just got certified last summer. But I've done a few California dives, and I just did a week in the Bahamas. Again, just with a GoPro or with the underwater camera. I definitely will get an underwater housing, but that's a big investment. And for me to invest in my gear towards music, that's how I make my living. For me to invest another 10 grand or 15,000 on vacation photos, I'm not sure I'm ready to do that yet for the underwater rig. I might save that for retirement. So far, I mean, visually the same thing. I'm trying to get the cool angles, trying to get, close to the shark without the shark biting my hand off, and, trying to get like, cool little fish or octopus or whatever. But yeah, nothing, I haven't had any great scuba diving photos yet. Some like, okay, fun, because like I said, it's just a point and shoot. Vacation photos? It's a good question. So, I said before that my Nikon's big and heavy. Well, my Sony weighs a lot less. So in previous vacations, I just bring the Sony. I use that to shoot photos, and even like I've shot bands with it. I'm like, well, I'm gonna go see a little festival. I'll shoot the band from the stage. I just kind of have a wide angle lens, so if I can get close, it's good. But I also had it in Rome for the Colosseum, so I wanted that wide lens, and it weighs almost nothing. So it still wouldn't be my go-to for work, but for vacation photos, the Sony's great. So that's the difference. It's a lot less to pack too.
Sure.
And yes, I can't help myself. I take the camera even on vacation.
When I stopped working bands a number of years ago, I had to, for for a very long time, I had to stop myself from like creating marketing plans in my head while I was at shows.
Right. I mean, I'm like, oh, they could light this better, or they could do this better. And it's just in my DNA.
Yeah, Batman still does that. Okay.
It's what I do.
So, what was
So
it
I
like
think-
shooting? No, go ahead.
No, you're reading the one
Okay.
that I was about to say.
What was it like shooting the Mongolian band The Who? How did you deal with like
Oh,
the language barrier? Because I
so
don't
they had
think
it.
any of them speak English, do they?
One of them wasn't. One or two spoke a little bit of English. I think typically when somebody says they don't speak English, they have a decent understanding. They're more than they just aren't comfortable speaking English on camera. So there was one guy who he had pretty good English, and then there was a couple guys that were like they basically understood, but a lot of them. I mean, there's like 8 guys in that band.
Right.
A lot of them knew nothing, but they had a translator with them. Their tour manager at the time, she was translating everything for us, and it does make it hard. But like I think I have a little video clip of that shoot, and I was like, okay, 1, 2, and they were like, whoo. So I was just like, okay, ready, 1, 2, whoo, and it's you can act it out like a child. And I mean, I do that even when people do understand what I'm speaking, because you kind of like, I'm like, look up here, or do this, or give me more, come on, tough, or like, oh, give me a little smile. So they kind of understood. That was another Metal Hammer shoot, and I kind of spent the whole day with them. So practicing backstage and on stage with them and everything else. But yeah, the language barrier, luckily they did have a translator, but I pretty much just like, a lot of times I'll manhandle somebody and I'll usually ask first. It's a big thing with me. I don't want to go and grab somebody's hair or shoulders and have a wife or a girlfriend walk in and go, why the hell are you touching my man? So I'm always like, hey, is it okay if I position you? Most of the time they're like, of course, who cares? And I'm like, okay, stand like this and let's put your hair forward because you look fat if your hair is behind you. It slims out the face. And I'm just like, okay, now put your arm here. Like, no, like, why can't you fold your arms? Sometimes guys are like, they fold their arms, and I'm like, do you really not know how to fold your arms? Phil from Sacred Reich, I'm talking about you, who I love, but he's like, I don't know, I can't fold my arms. So it was like a running joke for a long time that he couldn't fold his arms. So yeah, I just will move them around too if there's a language barrier.
Okay. My final question is, how have you seen the metal scene changing over the years?
Ooh, well, that's a long years, but so let's see. So I got into it in the heyday in the 80s, but I was still a teenager and not working in the music industry. So by the time I moved to LA, it was literally like Sunset Strip had dried up, clubs were closing, magazines all shifted. Even the magazine that I dreamt of always working for, instead of having Slayer on the cover, they wanted Pearl Jam on the cover. I was like, no, and Alice in Chains and Stone Temple Pilots, and it was very much the Seattle scene. So other than Pantera was big in the 90s, but other than them, it was like a lot of crossover stuff, 9 Inch Nails. Then it became more of like the new metal stuff. We had bands like Korn and Static X coming up. So then I would say now has been a great resurgence. The weird thing is that metal fans have always been fans, collectors. They're not passive listeners. Somebody doesn't go and like turn on the radio and casually listen to Slayer. It's they might listen to that. About? They might listen to Lady Gaga or Adele on the radio, but they're not gonna casually listen to Slayer. So metal fans collect everything. So now bands are putting out like 5 different copies of their album on vinyl, different colors, and they can sell that same album 5 times over because the metal fans want to collect it all. The passive pop fan that turns on the radio, I don't think is going to do that. So the metal scene actually seems to be thriving right now, which is great for me. Sure. But there was a big lull.
I have a good friend who's very into the indie SoundCloud Bandcamp scene of metal and all of these like super esoteric subgenres of metal, and there's a lot of really great stuff happening right now.
Absolutely. It's kind of exciting. I mean, the big bands are still around. They're doing that Power Trip Festival out in India where it's like Iron Maiden, Metallica, Guns N' Roses, and it's like $1,000 tickets.
Yeah, I was gonna say $3 million.
I was like, oh, I wonder what a pit ticket is. I'm like, $3,500. Well, let's see if I can work that event.
Yeah.
Because again, it's a show that like I wouldn't want to miss, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm not paying $3,000 for any concert.
Word.
I do have one more question, which is, so
Awesome.
you recommended Entheos.
Yes.
Any other bands you want to recommend to our listeners?
Ooh, new bands. Well, check out the new In Flames. Their new album Foregone is awesome. It's on Nuclear Blast Records. And let's see.
I mean,
what
you're
other bands?
required to say that.
Kinda, but I also don't mind. I mean, actually, you know, I would say I always tend to go back to the bands I already love. So, you know, it's like Death Angel is always amazing, and Testament I love, and the new Fear Factory, they got a new singer and he's awesome. So as far as new bands go, I'm probably the wrong person to ask because I listen. I'm still listening to Pantera from the 90s.
Aren't we all?
So yeah, Entheos. I loved working with them. I loved their vibe, and I thought the singer was amazing.
Right on.
Awesome.
Patch, do you have any other?
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
It's been such a joy to talk with you and get these stories and get your insights. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Twisted Cat.
So I've been Twisted Cat.
And I'm Patch.
I'm Batman.
Yeah.
Who hasn't participated at all, but he's here. And this has been Get in the Van!
Get in the van!
Get in the van!
We're doing podcast stuff.